Hello and welcome. I'm your host, William Lou. This is the Reaction Podcast on the Hello and Welcome Podcast, presented by Betway. Make sure you hit the QR code below for all your sports gambling needs. Although I would not advise for preseason because you get some very strange results in preseason. Not to say that this was like particularly strange. Raptors losing tonight, 113 to 95. I promise you, like it wasn't that bad. It was kind of just like Washington's third stringer or second stringer, sometimes even their starters, honestly, playing against the Raptors' third stringers, as you would imagine, that would extend out the advantage for Washington. But yeah, still not like the most sexy showing by the Raptors, who had about a week off. Almost like an extended training camp period here to take in a lot of practices at OVO and at least get some healthy bodies back. Obviously, RJ Barrett, if you haven't heard already, is out with the shoulder injury that he suffered with the moving screen against Jonas Valanciunas. I did watch that playback, and I gotta say, JV, I mean, I know you're known for the physicality, but that was a bit of a, I don't know. I wouldn't say it's a dirty screen because I don't think there's any intent in it, but certainly a very illegal screen. And it sucks to lose RJ in that because you see the night and day difference when you take him out of the lineup. Luckily, the Raptors did bring Scottie Barnes back into the mix. He had been away from the team for a portion of training camp, roughly about a week, due to personal reasons. And I think seeing him back in the lineup, that was promising. Strange didn't development today. Didn't see Kelly. I don't even know if I saw Kelly on the bench, which was a little strange. Kelly had been really involved, and I think that offensively, Kelly has been doing a lot of heavy lifting for this group. Him and for the second unit, RJ for the starting lineup. So when you take out your two most like informed players, you do lead to this kind of a sluggish game. And of course, the officiating I don't think was not the strongest in terms of just like making it a viewable experience. I know for a lot of preseason, a lot of the first off, a lot of guys are rusty. Certainly, a lot of guys. There's a lot more grabbing and holding and whatever. But I also do feel like there's like new points of emphasis put in each year, and I think players kind of get tripped up. Regardless, though, first quarter was so ugly that the numbers here. Uh, Washington had 4 made field goals. Toronto had 8 made field goals, so for a total of 12 in the first quarter. 12 made field goals by both teams, as compared to 19 turnovers, with 9 for I think Washington and 10 for the Raptors, and also 18 fouls, 10 on the Raptors, 8 on Washington. Like when you talk about 19 turnovers, 18 fouls, and 12 made field goals, it just does not make for a good viewing product. Luckily, the game kind of like eased up from that point onward. There was still like your regular amount of fouling, but it wasn't like everything was called. Um, so yeah, all of it to say it was it was a bit of a nasty game. Let's start though with Scottie Barnes and how he did. And of course, by the way, if you're watching live on YouTube, which you can do after most games, I feel like this season, hopefully they're not all like this. You can leave your comments, you can leave your questions in the chat. Our producers will be going around and I will be answering them in a couple of minutes. I'm just going to go through the game review first, but again, if you got questions, they'll be looking for it. So Scottie Barnes in the return. I thought first off, the first minute of seeing Scottie back in the lineup was genuinely exhilarating. So this is Scottie's first like in-game action since March 1st. And if you remember that game, the Raptors were playing Golden State, I think here in Toronto actually. And there was like a rebound, and him and Quickly both went for it, and somehow all of that led to him fracturing his hand. He also had hand surgery. He's had a busy offseason. He signed the max rookie scale extension in the offseason. You might have heard about some personal developments in his life as well. So like, there's a lot of things going on. But ultimately, for as much as we love seeing Scottie and as much as the franchise has been oriented towards Scottie, I think for him, probably personally, it's like there's been so much talk, there's been so much ideation, there's been so much discussion. We just haven't seen a lot of play. I mean, like March 1st till now, like we're about to change the clocks back again. Like it's a long time. And so getting to sort of see him on the court again. I know it's not like he's shown anything particularly new. But just the excitement of that was great. And I think that kind of carried over to his play as well, because literally within the first minute of him coming back to the court, he had already on his first possession caught it, attacked, and then finished through contact over Alex Sarr, who's a 7-footer at the rim. So that was an impressive finish. Next play down, he brings the ball up in transition. He sees Kyle Kuzma is like kind of backing up on him, and he just pulls up from mid range, probably with like 18 seconds on the clock. Not necessarily in the best shot selection, but ultimately, I love the aggression because he nailed that, no problem. And then the next play down, he gets the rebound, he's pushing the break, and he sees that Jakob is ahead of the pack, and he throws a nice dime to Jakob for the transition dunk. And literally, like 70 seconds into the game, Washington is calling timeout. And you can imagine how frustrated the coach is on that front because that's exactly how the game started against Toronto when they played the preseason matchup in Montreal. That was last Sunday now. But like, regardless, from Washington's perspective, I think from the Raptors' perspective, it was just really exciting seeing Scottie come out like that, man. Like it was just like he was super aggressive, almost over aggressive. You know what I mean? Like I thought he was like typically Scottie really does a great job of getting guys involved, but I thought he was especially looking for his own shot and taking quick mid rangers and threes and stuff like that. Those are all like just part of preseason, and I think that it, is part of him shaping out the rest. I don't think there's going to be some sort of fundamental change in sort of how he approaches the game. We know sort of how much he likes to set guys up. But even just seeing that alone was like, oh yeah, like that's what's been missing from the Raptors is sort of like guy who 6'9", can take over when he wants to. I think he's talked about on media day how much he wants to work on, or how much he worked on sort of his individual creation and his shot creation and sort of getting to his shots. I think that's probably an extension of that. When you saw him come out super aggressive, was just him wanting to showcase, okay, I got more in my bag. This is what I'm working on, and I love that about it. And that's not to say that there weren't like down moments too, right? Like I think with Scottie, first off, he picked up 3 fouls in the first 6 minutes. Again, some of that is just going to the officiating. I think Tony Brothers was really, just I don't know, he was just blowing the whistle like quite a bit, which honestly, like there's a lot of sloppy play when you involve the Washington Wizards and the Toronto Raptors. At the same time, though, it was like almost unplayable this game. 32 fouls on the Raptors and 25 on the Wizards, and a combined 43 turnovers for the two sides. So it's just kind of like nasty all around. But then again, I think Scottie also threw some bad passes, also got himself in some bad situations where he opened himself up to get double teamed and was too slow passing it out. So I ended up with 5 turnovers and 3 fouls, and 4 of those, and I think 4 turnovers and 3 fouls were in the first quarter. So despite the fact that he started off super hot, I think he also kind of cooled off, which it happens. I think there were also moments where he looked kind of tired. I think especially towards the end of the first half, you saw moments where he sort of hands on hips and he was sort of like just like waiting in the corner, a classic sign of, I'm tired. You guys got this for a little bit. I think some of that again is just owing to the fact that he hasn't played since last March, but also this is the first time he's gotten into actual preseason action. So I do think that there's going to be a gradual ramp up for him over the course of preseason. But still, like there were good moments. And I think like when he really kind of turned on the intensity, which was to start the first quarter, which was to start the third quarter, where he also then, flew in for a pair of steals. And, both times he slowed up on the fast break, looked back, his signature kind of like taunt kind of thing. Then he dunked the ball. But I love the pressure there. I love the intensity. It kind of just feels like when he turns it on, it's kind of like, oh yeah, he is the most physically dominant player in this game. And I think there needs to be more moments of that, which may be related to conditioning as well. I don't know. Like, I think when you're at peak conditioning and you're at that level of peak athlete, you can make those plays on a more consistent basis rather than sort of just the occasional flashes. And then there was also a play where I think he tried to attack off the dribble. There wasn't much there. He like dribbled into the corner for a dribble handoff with Davion Mitchell, set the screen for Davion after making the pass, and then slipped it along the baseline, caught it, and then finished through contact for another and one. So it was like, instantly he was sort of making his impact in the third quarter, and he ultimately finished with 16 points. Scottie did 8 rebounds, and assists, 2 steals. Unfortunately, he went 0 for 5 from 3, but I think that he was pretty aggressive looking for his shot overall. Sometimes, honestly, there weren't even necessarily good shots. But I think it was just him trying to get himself back into the mix, get himself to sort of shake off some rust, while also showcasing like, yeah, there's like 10 good things that Scottie does every single game that really do stand out. And so, you got him back in the mix. and he got to play 20 minutes. I think you'll probably see an escalation of that. The Raptors have 3 more preseason games over the next week, so I'm expecting that to probably go up to like 30 at minimum, if not 32, 33, just to sort of get him in again into the mix of things, because it wasn't a promising sign that he already got winded, even though I know that's a little bit realistic in terms of just having not played for quite a while. Um, Also, I don't know, man. I mean, again, life changes at home. I think you can imagine him losing a bit of sleep right now. Uh, but in addition to that, I think the rest of the starting lineup, to me, once again, no RJ Barrett. That created an opportunity for Ochai Agbaji to come in and try to play his game. I actually thought Ochai played decently. I know the stats are always fairly underwhelming with him because he's not like he's not a big scorer. He's not a guy who has the ball. He doesn't really do that much offensively. But I thought he made a couple good cuts. Couldn't knock down the open corner threes, or I like sort of semi-contested corner threes. He was mostly short on those. I know they've been talking so much about balancing his shot and stuff like that. That needed to get better, but I thought he did a good job defensively. For the starting lineup, I actually just did an episode about this, which you can catch on YouTube or wherever you listen to pods. But did a whole video about this where it's just like who should be in the Raptors rotation and specifically who should be the fifth starter. And I did highlight Ochai as a potential option, mostly because I like the fact that he can really defend and not need the ball. I do think that like in the starting lineup, they kind of need that. Again, like this is all moot because guys aren't healthy right now. We haven't seen Quickly just yet, and I imagine Quickly will look kind of rusty when he comes in because he's not been cleared through contact yet. RJ, who knows if he's going to make the home opener? I would imagine he wants to, but at the same time, his shoulder injury I think is at least like 2 weeks. So we'll see. Other guys like Bruce or whatever, like Jacoby, those guys had surgery, or I guess Jacoby didn't have surgery, but like, those guys need more time to come back. But yeah, I mean, I think when you have the starting lineup, at least when you have like your guys healthy, I actually think the starting five, like there is a discussion to be had about whether it's gonna be Grady or whether it's gonna be Ochai. And I think Ochai brings you a defensive presence. I liked what he did in this game. I like the fact that he's learning to play better without the ball. Which is to say that like he's never been like particularly good with the ball, but at the same time, I think that you need to make yourself like at least somewhat, I don't know, man, at least somewhat effective, like at least do something with the ball, without the ball and on offense. And I think he's done a good job with that. I think he made a couple athletic moves going to the hoop. Those are the things that he's stressing. I also think that like the more I'm watching Ochai and listening to his interviews and even listening to how coaches talk about him, I would love for him to be more confident and assertive. And I know it's hard. Like, how are you gonna just like draw your confidence out of nowhere? But I do feel like I don't know. There's like an inherent presence that you feel with like a Jamal Shed, for example. He's like flying around. He's into you. He's getting after. He's taking chances, and he's just kind of going. You could tell he's got a lot of confidence, especially on the defensive end, and he's got a lot of self belief. And he doesn't really doubt himself. He just kind of goes and executes it. Ochai, despite being how physically strong he is, and um, the abilities that he does have on the defensive end, it almost feels like he's like oopsie, kind of almost out the way kind of thing. Like I would love for him to like, or I would love. I guess they can't really change your demeanor, but even something from the coaching staff to sort of get him to be a little bit more imposing, a little bit more aggressive. I would think if he just leaned into that a little bit more, it'd be a lot better. But I do think he's actually slowly making more progress, and I think he's playing a decent game. Jakob, pretty solid as always. Although I would have loved to see him rebound a little bit better. In this game, he had to play on the perimeter a lot because the Wizards changed up their starting lineup. They went with Alex Sarr at center rather than Sarr and Jonas Valanciunas in the starting five as they did in the first game. That meant that Jakob had to guard Sarr a lot and pick and pops, and Sarr did get open for 2 threes, and he knocked those down. Pretty much everything else, like it was fine. But like, yeah, I thought Jakob made a couple good finishes. The one guy in the starting lineup that I wouldn't say frustrated because I think that's a little too strong, but I think I was very underwhelmed by what Grady brought in this game. I know he knocked down 2 threes, which was like cool, like 2 of 5 from three. Like that's kind of like the game right now. But I think number one, like in the first game, you saw him make a much better impact of finding opportunities to attack off the dribble, attack closeouts, and make plays. Knock down a mid-range jumper, for example. Um, I think that the other part too is just like you saw him play super fast in transition. You saw him make a lot of plays in the open court, and there just weren't as many of those opportunities in this one, despite the fact there were so many turnovers. It just kind of didn't end up in Grady's hands. But I also think that like offensively, he just looked a little bit too like easy to bottle up. You know what I mean? Like I think one thing you can compare him to, for example, is like the role that Corey Kispert did coming off the bench. And I know Kispert is like older. I think he's like 24, maybe he might be 25 by now. He's definitely physically stronger, but like you could see him like okay, catch and shoot for threes, super automatic, whatever. Like him and he's probably a little bit more automatic than Grady is right now. Um, but maybe Grady gets to that point. But it's also like the strength and like the determination of like, okay, I'm gonna put two dribbles down and I'm gonna finish. And you saw him finish like twice over Jakob, which is pretty good. Like Jakob's a good defensive center. He's 7 foot, and Curry Kispert's like, 6'5", 6'4" ish, and whatever. So like that's already finishing in a very impressive fashion. But I think that you just don't see that decisiveness from Grady. Like it still looks kind of a little bit loose. Maybe it's because he's bigger and more gangly, but when he puts it on the deck, it's kind of easier to sort of like curl off his drives with the sort of physicality. And he's not necessarily taking, or maybe that's not fair to say overall, because I think he actually looked pretty good in the first game, and he looked pretty decent in the open run as well. That was at McGill. This is like an eternity ago now, aka last week. But um yeah, I don't know. It's just not as strong. Like it's not as imposing, Like if he's finishing, he's kind of finishing ahead of or around but it's never through. You know what I mean? And I do think that like for Grady, I would have loved to see the physicality get up there. I would love to see a little bit more off the dribble. Like again, like it's mostly just catch and shoot. And this looked a lot more like what he did early in the season, rookie wise, last year versus like the progression that he's been on. So truth be told, I was actually pretty disappointed in this performance. I think especially because defensively he wasn't really getting after it either. There was a couple opportunities where rebounds were loose and he just wasn't like showing you that ability, that like hunger. And I get that it's preseason, but at the same time, like it's not like one of the vets. You know what I mean? Like, okay, like JV taking it easy in preseason. It's like, fine, okay. Like he's played in the league for like 10 years, 12 years. You know what I mean? Like, I think for Grady, you would love to see like that hunger, that willingness to impose, that eagerness to showcase what you got. And it just didn't really come through today in a very effective way. Now, I thought the Raptors second unit actually came in and did some pretty good things. Number one, I think that you saw once again the impact that Jamal Shead can have on the defensive end. I think that more than anything else, Jamal is a very interesting case because offensively, I think it's pretty clear that there's going to be like there's going to need to be some like real development on that front with the 3-point shot. It's weird because I feels like that's the only thing he's really missing. Because like for me, I know that he can kind of get to the hoop a little bit. He did it much better in the other game against Washington. I thought today he just missed a couple of passes, even a couple of like the and one finishes that turn into 2 free throws. Like even those, I think he probably should have finished a little bit better. There's whatever. There's going to be some size issues in terms of him trying to finish at the hoop, which is like inherent to anybody. Like I saw him at practice the other day. He's like a little bit shorter than me, so he's like 6 foot, maybe 5'11", that range. I would say a little bit taller than Fred though, but still, he's in that range. And so he's gonna have difficulties, finishing, regardless. But I do feel like the catch and shoot three for him just absolutely needs to get to an elite level. And that's like clearly the make or break skill because he went 0 for 5 from 3 today. He was pretty open on a lot of these and he just couldn't knock them down. I'm not necessarily sure what the fix is just yet. I think you need to watch a little bit more. I mean, I need to watch a little bit more. But at the same time, it's like not a new problem. I know for example, at the college level, he only shot about 32%, I think 31 or 32% over like a 3-year period. So like this is something that he really needs to nail down because like it would just to me it'd just be such a shame because so much other stuff that he does is just a positive. Like the fact that he's like I'm not even talking about only defensively, although we've certainly seen that, but like even the playmaking, even the ability to read the game, I think all that's there. You know what I mean? Like, first possession, he comes in the game, he works the pick and roll with Bruno Fernando, and this is at a point where the Raptors were really stuck offensively because Scottie picked up 3 fouls and had to come out, and basically the Raptors weren't getting nothing. Coming out of the timeout, he works the pick and roll with Bruno Fernando and gets him a bounce pass in the lane for a layup. Like it's just small, simple things like that. And the next play where it's like, and then he stole the pass against Jordan Poole, which whatever. Jordan Poole is pretty sloppy, but pretty good defense on the ball by Jamal. Then he like works the pick and roll, realizes that he can't get the pull up jumper to fall, but then he dribbles like into the paint in a way that he's essentially sealing his man behind him, snaking the pick and roll as his man's trying to recover back in. And because he knows he feels the guy on his hip, he actually then used the roll from Bruno Fernando, not the first screen, but the second screen. He used the roll to then he slowed up to the level that Bruno was on and then got him screened again by dribbling through the lane on the other side using Fernando as a second screen. And then when he crossed back over, that created a bit of space for Fernando to, roll into, and he dropped him with a little bounce pass, like little subtle things like that, where it's just like, that's really good. And that's really good awareness of sort of how he can get guys open. Now, Bruno didn't even finish the layup there. He actually got fouled and went to the foul line. But I think actually, no, he missed a short bunny, but then Boucher cleaned up with an and one. So that was nice. But just small stuff like that. Even small stuff like there's a hit ahead pass and he's the last man back and he has to close out all the way from being the last man back at the rim to all the way out to the 3-point line because Corey Kispert was open. And he did it under control, but he also did it like super fast. And he ended up deflecting the pass out of Kispert's hands and making the Wizards reset. That's not a stat or that's not anything except for the fact that he potentially stopped a fast break just by him reading the play and being aware and like showing you that aggressiveness. Small stuff like that, you know what I mean? Like he's just playing well. And I think that like in the second quarter, you saw him, make the right cuts a couple of times. Again, I thought Washington did a good job of increasing their defensive pressure. And I think the Raptors were playing through the post. It didn't have Kelly, which I think would have done a really good job of sort of playing through the post. It did it more through Jakob and Bruno, which just isn't as effective. But at the same time, moments where the Raptors got stuck, you saw Jamal cutting in, and he got two plays where he was able to earn himself 4 foul shots just off of good cuts and stuff like that. So like it's stuff like that where it's just like I just feel like he's just done a good job overall, and he showcased clearly that he can really read the game. It's actually quite similar to Davion Mitchell, who similar player in terms of like not particularly impactful offensively. He got one roll, like he got one driving layup, which was nice. He just worked the pick and roll. Defender got on the wrong side of the big, and he was able to get all the way to the basket before the help came at the hoop. One thing I did like with Mitchell though was his playmaking. In a game where the Raptors only recorded 20 assists, he had 6 of those assists, and I thought he did a really good job of operating in pick and roll, getting guys open. He found Boucher for a couple cutting dunks in the third quarter, which is the only time where the Raptors actually look kind of smooth offensively. I thought he also did a good job of just working the pick and roll with Jakob. Jakob's an easy guy to play pick and roll with because he's really smart. He sets big screens, and he knows how to position himself. He's got good hands. So, he connected with him a couple of times. He connected with Scottie as well on a rolling layup. I just think that like he made good passes. There's one play where he worked the pick and roll at the top of the floor, I think on the right side. He came off the pick, and before he even got to like free throw line area, he realized that the defender in the left corner was tagging over on to sort of play a little bit extra help defense against Jakob. And Davion saw this and instantly threw like an overhead hook pass on the money into the corner for Chris Boucher, who knocked down a corner 3. Stuff like that, where it's just like that's a really good read, and that's also a really difficult pass to make, especially to make accurately on time. And so I just thought he did a really good job of like responsibly running the offense. I think he also did a good job defensively as well, partially due to the injuries. But I think Darko did give it a look to see what it would look like if you had his 3 defensive specialists, essentially guys who would come off the bench potentially. But like you had Shead, you had Davion Mitchell, and you had Ochai Agbaji out there for extended stretches. And I gotta say, like, especially with Scottie and Jakob in the front court, that actually was like a pretty disruptive lineup that they were able to put out there. Now, Washington was just kind of shooting lights out from 3, and that's ultimately why they won this game. They hit 17 threes, Raptors hit 7. That was kind of the huge difference in this game. Washington was clearly outside of Kuzma and Poole shooting like just garbage. Like literally, I saw Kuzma throw 2 air balls on there, and that doesn't include an airball free throw, which is kind of incredible. And Poole going 1 for 7. Like the rest of their guys, like they actually did a really good job of moving the ball and taking good shots, but also most importantly making them. Like Alex Sarr picking and popping a couple times against Jakob for 3s. That's just smart. He's probably going to get that against a lot of centers who are like Jakob and traditionally want to stay closer to the paint. Keyshawn George, I think he's been really impressive. Somehow, me being the sickle that I am, I've actually seen all 3 of Washington's preseason games. I just happened to be watching Knicks Wizards Was it last night? I think it might have been last night. I think they were the lead in to the WNBA final game one, which was just an incredible game, by the way, between the Liberty and the Lynx. You have to go watch it. Just yeah, honestly, that was one of the best basketball games I've seen, and it was actually quite jarring to go from that to like, let's watch Raptors Wizards and throw up 19 turnovers and 18 fouls in the first quarter combined. Regardless, so like I've actually seen a lot of Washington Wizards games, and I feel like George has actually played really, really well. He's really impressed me. He's stronger than he looked like he was in college. I don't know if there's like a body transformation that took place over the summertime or whatever, but I think he's done a really good job defending. He doesn't necessarily uh, have the ball all the time to run as the point guard. He's probably more of the off guard, but more importantly, he's been able to catch and shoot for three very effectively. He's confident with those shots. He's taking the good shots, which honestly, in a team like Washington, when you consider their vets are like Kuzma and Poole, those guys took so many bad decisions that you would think those guys are the rookies versus like George, who was actually quite responsible. I think defended pretty well. He's got some strength, and I just overall thought, so far in preseason, he's been a clear standout for Washington. I think they've like potentially really hit on something good here. Koulibaly, I think, has been solid regardless. He's continued to get stronger. And, he had a driving dunk at one point, which was really nice. Although he did flub a two-handed transition dunk, which was pretty hilarious to see. Classic Wizards moment. But, like, those guys have actually played pretty decently, is what I'm trying to say. And I think on the flip side for the Raptors, like, you just didn't see enough of how much guys can touch the paint and impact it. Because I think one of the concerning things out of this game is just the fact that the Raptors only got 33 3-point attempts up. They only made 7 of those too. So it was concerning that A, they didn't generate a lot of good threes, and B, they didn't make a lot of them. In fact, I feel like Boucher hit 3, which, we know that's kind of like a little bit random in a way. Not to say Boucher's not a good shooter, but like he's gonna shoot some contested ones or whatever. But like ultimately, you can't always bank on him going 3 or 4. Even with that, they still didn't shoot the 3 well. And I think that goes down to a couple of things. Number one, they just didn't have a lot of strong shooters in this game, right? When you look at like Jamal Shead getting 5 threes, ideally he makes 2 of those. That would make him an NBA like level, really, really good role player. Versus like if he makes 0 for 5, and it's like now you have a really hard time playing him, despite the fact that he's so good at all the other things in the game. I probably still play him because he was still net positive, but you could definitely see how that would drag on your team. Then you got Davion Mitchell, your starting point guard, who doesn't take a single 3, right? Which, in today's modern game is like very, very rare. Obviously, Jakob is not a guy who's going to shoot threes. Scottie, rusty, whatever, but goes 0 for 5 from 3. Ochai 0 for 2. They're working on things like balancing his shot, which is like, clearly it's going to be a work in progress there. You know, uh, it's just not, there's just not enough shooters, period, in terms of the shooting talent who was available. The other thing too is just like they weren't impacting the paint enough. Now, this is weird because they actually got a lot more paint points than Washington. Actually, I don't know, to be honest, because Washington did kind of pull away in the fourth quarter, but like over the bulk of the game was when it was like pretty much tied the whole way. Like I feel like Toronto was definitely impacting the paint a lot more. Washington was hitting from 3. But the thing is, like, they're impacting the paint because their guards primarily are not looking to shoot threes, and they're mostly dumping it off to play interior with their bigs. And I think that's fine. That's obviously not a bad option, but it does mean that like there's very little opportunities for like, I guess the type of paint pressure where guys are scrambling and rotating, flying off their assignments to come to help at the paint, and then kickouts and swing. Like there were like almost no swing actions from the Raptors where they got a guard going downhill, they got like RJ going downhill, they got like Scottie going downhill, and obviously RJ wasn't available. But my point is like those type of actions from like strong ball handlers where they're impacting the paint, they're making a real hard move, and then they kick out and swing. They didn't even have those. And so I think it's just a little bit different when they're sort of throwing little bounce passes and they're sticking the pick and roll and they're playing through the bigs. It just doesn't hit the same way, I think, offensively, when it comes to generating threes. And I think that this actually will be a problem. I mean, like, we're going to play Boston next, for example, on Sunday. Uh, that's a team that's going to play 5 out spacing. And I think the Raptors tonight, at most, they had like 1 or 2 shooters on the court. And some of that's due to injuries, of course, right? Like Jacoby Walter, they drafted as a shooter. He's been injured. Emmanuel Quickly is their best shooter. He's yet to play in preseason, yet to be cleared. RJ has been shooting the 3 better, and even beyond that, he does a great job of touching the paint. He obviously wasn't here today as well. And then Kelly, who's their spacing five, was also not available, and I don't even know if he made the trip. I didn't see him. So like, where are you gonna get those from? But at the same time, like that is a problem to kind of flag. But ultimately, like, look, you saw Scottie come back. I think Scottie showed you the impact that he can make. I think again, it's just about sort of catching up to the speed of the game. Not having all those fouls and just like again, this felt very much like you jump in the pool for the first time and you're super excited, and then you're like, I don't know, you're just you like cramp up a little bit, then you gotta like chill out a little bit, and then you gotta go back in the pool. Like I think for Scotty, it's just a lot of rust. That analogy did not hit whatsoever. Um, it's okay, we move, but yeah, I mean, that I think for me is the main takeaway. The rest of it is just kind of like whatever. Again, not trying to rationalize the loss, but we do have to keep the bigger picture in mind. And yeah, it was not the prettiest performance. And I don't think there's that much else to say for me. Yeah, Kelly was listed as inactive. Thank you, Jerome, for letting me know. So yeah, we'll see what reason that was, but yeah, I don't imagine he's hurt or anything. I mean, it doesn't seem like that. He also spoke to the media recently. So anyway, we'll get to the bottom of that, I guess, eventually. But we can take some of your questions, Jerome. If you have them, please let me know what people are saying, man. On a Friday night, are they watching this stream? Are people actually tuning into this? Yes, they are. Okay, number one from Lawrence. What does Chris Boucher have to do in order for Darko to put him back into the regular rotation? So I think that's a good question because it's not, I guess it's a little bit like an elephant in the room situation where it's just like clearly he's one of the most productive players. When you talk about like you list their lineup, he's definitely one of their top 9 most productive players, and that's typically your rotation. So you should typically just put him in the rotation. I think last season with Chris and with Darko, I think that the role that Darko wanted to see out of his team last year was so much about passing, so much about playing through the post, so much about, cutting and moving off of each other. Those were things that honestly Chris just weren't good at. And I don't think that like he was so strong defensively that it kind of made up for it. I think when Chris has succeeded in the past, which was mostly under Nick, it was during times where you know, it was he was able to fly around. The Raptors really prioritized offensive rebounding. They were really playing a lot of zones. They were throwing a lot of length on the court, and quite frankly, like I think it just kind of worked a little bit better when you're sort of just like letting them fly around. I think that like right now with Darko, they're certainly playing a different style of offense, but at the same time, like it doesn't really matter what style of offense you're playing. Your skill comes in, and that's what translates across systems, and that's where you got to give Chris credit. Like no one would say Chris is like the most skilled or polished player. And even to this point, even after spending like 7, 8 years in the league now, he's still not like a polished player. But he's clearly got skill in terms of like he's clearly a good 3-point shooter at this point. He's on a pretty good role right now. He was 3 of 4 today. That's a good thing. The other skill is he knows sort of where to be, and he actually has timed it really well to like when to crash on the glass, when to sort of cut. I think he's done a lot of good things with that. He's played well off of other guys too. I mean, I've always thought him and Scottie have had good chemistry with each other. I think Scottie really likes guys who are willing runners, big targets, and I think Chris has always been those things that can complement what Scottie does. And I think half court setting, like okay, fine, like it's basically like in terms of skill wise, like you compare him to like Mogbo, and I thought Mogbo actually played decently. I should talk about Mogbo in a second, but I think Chris certainly has more an ability to impact, especially with the scoring. I mean, even today, right? Like in a game where it was super ugly, whatever. Chris still ended up having 22 points and 7 rebounds, and he was like the Raptors' leading scorer easily in 18 minutes too. You know what I mean? Like I think that this is not an anomaly. We've seen this from Chris so many different times. So I think functionally, like with the system, I think that Chris has probably done a better job of sort of reading how to play within it. Again, there's things that I would love to see from him, like just get better at screening, be a little bit more assured, like even slow down like 10%. I feel like would help a lot, because you do see him, for example, like stumbling a lot or sort of losing his balance. You know what I mean? Just like and those are things that you could kind of nitpick, but ultimately, like he's productive enough. I don't even care what system they're playing. I think just some of the talent on the roster, he's worthy enough to be in the rotation, especially coming off the bench. I think the difference is just like, is that the priority this year, right? Is the priority developing the young guys, or is it like trying to be as competitive as possible? And unfortunately, I do think that Chris is once again on the wrong side of that in terms of just, and this has nothing to do with him. So this is like very unfair, but it's like, they're probably much more invested in trying to develop Jonathan Mogbo, who they gave like a multi-year contract to, who they took with the 31st pick. And they're trying to sort of like get him as many reps as possible and hopefully turn him into something, who is 22 years old, rather than like reinvested in Chris, who, like, what he is, but he's also 31. That's the part for me. It's like, if it were up to me, obviously I would put Chris in the rotation. I'm certainly would love to see the Raptors play competitive basketball. I think even in the context of development, it's more important for them to be competitive because of the fact that you're not just playing like meaningless basketball. Like, it's not going to be like one long preseason for the whole year, which would be unbearable. And yeah, Chris is like, he's a good player, and I thought today he was actually the Raptors either best player or second best player. I think there were moments that I think, especially when Scottie was on, he was clearly the best player. I think also Davion had some moments, Shead had some moments, but Chris was by far the most productive throughout the game, and you got to salute him for that. You really do. Another question. We're gonna do three, so we're gonna do two more. Next one from EDE. Thoughts on Jonathan Mogbo? Some nice defensive actions, but still looked awkward offensively. Thanks for the question, because I actually did forget to talk about Mogbo. I think I saw a little bit more from Mogbo today. Overall box score is still like 5 points, 6 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 steals, a block, 2 of 6 from the field, 1 from 3, and he went 1 for 2 from the foul line in 19 minutes off the bench. So I think the one thing with Mogbo is you saw him play with the ball in his hands a little bit more. I think obviously a lot of that is just no Kelly in this game. That role kind of slid to him in a way. You saw him bring the ball up occasionally. You saw him even work some pick and rolls. It just be that sort of dynamic playmaking forward that, kind of is closer to his game. I think as well is he probably made better reads. Small things like you saw him, for example, there's one play I think maybe at the end of the third quarter, maybe towards the start of the fourth quarter, where he started driving the ball, got into a low crossover, which for a guy of his size is like, doing a low cross is actually not rare, but like, notable for sure. And he allowed for, I think he crossed over when he had like a screener rolling to the basket, and he used the cross to create a little bit more space and then dumped it off, I think, to Bruno. I think Bruno missed a layup and got fouled or whatever, but like, I think small plays like that, or like coming in off the offensive rebound, he just like ended up making a lot more plays than he did in the previous one. And so I'll be interested to sort of watch more of his progression. He didn't really stand out in summer league either, although I would have to say he did get injured after a game. So not like there was a huge opportunity there, but like, I think that for me, he does a little bit of everything right now. And that's actually, intriguing. It's just like, it gives you a lot more options. I do think that, like, especially if you're just going to play with the second unit right now, he's, I wouldn't say redundant, but I think Kelly's just so much better at playing the half court game that Mogbo wants to eventually play. Like, and I think Mogbo obviously has the athleticism. Like, they drew up a play where they came maybe after the start of the fourth quarter, I think, where they came out, they got him across screen to create a switch. He got Bub Carrington on him, and then he sealed him in the paint, threw his hands up. They threw a high-low pass to him, and he turned around and he dunked the ball with 2 hands. So, like, they're not obviously doing that for Kelly, because Kelly is not ultimately going to be dunking the ball with 2 hands. You know what I mean? Especially not at this age. But like, I think functionally though, what they want is a big who can handle the ball, who can drag another big player out in the perimeter. But obviously, Kelly doing that is because he can also shoot, and you want Mogbo to get to that point as well. But especially nowadays, like, so many teams are pressuring the ball. Like even Jakob, for example, having the ball at the top, you see him getting pressured above the 3-point line. Clearly, they're not afraid of Jakob driving or even shooting the three. They're just like, we're going to pressure the ball. But like, somebody who can handle the ball well in that scenario, and then open up space for guys to cut into, but also be like, a decent defender. I think that he did a better job today. I think he made some better reads defensively, playing mostly in help rather than sort of him shutting down his man one-on-one. But yeah, there's something there. Like, I don't know, he shows you some flashes. Like, there's, when he uses athleticism, it's like pretty good. Like, he'll like I said, he'll catch, stance onto the rim, and he'll go up for 2 hands and dunk it pretty easily. And it's like, for a guy who's 6'7", like, he's not that much taller than RJ, for example. Like, for a guy like 6'7", like, that's actually pretty impressive. I think he's jumping up there for some rebounds. But then again, I think that, like, until until the handle continues to get better, and I think his handle is pretty good for a forward. But until the handle gets even tighter, I think it's harder for him to sort of use athleticism off the bounce. And I think that's probably the next step for me is in terms of just like getting him more I don't know, more involved or more effective offensively. It's just him like getting tighter with the handle, being strong, and like that's kind of what Scottie does, right? Like Scottie's handle like is pretty good, but he's also so strong that like when he decides to start driving to the basket, guys aren't really stripping it off of him, and he doesn't like Scottie's not the one that needs to curl away and sort of like change lanes. You know what I mean? Like Scottie's driving through, and someone else has to get the hell out of the way. And his defender ends up sort of trailing him by the time he's finished driving. And I think Jonathan right now, especially because he needs to get stronger with the handle, is still getting curled off a lot of these drives. The more that he's able to sort of take it more in straight line pass, I think the better. But yeah, I thought today was actually much better than the other day. So yeah, he was decent today. I actually like Mogbo, and in terms of what happened in the fourth quarter, that was good. It was pretty much like just him. You know, yeah, not a lot of good things happen in the fourth quarter. I'll just say that much. We'll take our last question, and then we will get to our 3 stars, and we will get to the most important guy, the MIG. This one from Good Morning. How do you think the team is going to manage Chomche and his development going forward? He looks like an athletic freak, but calling him raw is probably an understatement. Yeah, look, I think so. A couple things. Like, I think when you draft a player like this, like you kind of need to know what you're getting into, right? And I think that like Darko, when I asked him this, when I went down to practice earlier this week, and I asked Darko specifically about Shamshe and what their developmental strategy and plan with him is, I think it's fairly notable that Darko said like we're gonna keep it super simple. Like on the court, we're gonna keep it super simple. We even saw one day we walked into practice where he was just working on like the simplest like 2-foot jump hooks, and I don't even want to, yeah, whatever, like whatever. He's just working on jump hooks. And Darko's response was also like, look, it's also a huge life change for him. And so it's knowing where to be, knowing how to eat, knowing where to eat, knowing like, when to be on the bus on time, stuff like that. So it's like there's just such a big life adjustment. He's like, more than anything else, he's such like a huge fish out of water right now in terms of his life scenario. Like 2-3 years ago, I'm not even kidding. This guy was farming. There's a video, and this is something that I actually asked Shamshe about in summer league. I was like, wait, because he just casually kind of let it slip that he was a farmer. And I was like, wait, you farm? And he literally listed off like all the stuff he was like farming, like bananas, cocoa, coffee, you know, uh, plantain, like I don't know, like just whatever, like a bunch of produce. And then we actually got footage of this. If you watch, there's like a documentary out there that kind of highlighted his last season in the NBA Africa Academy, and it kind of takes you to sort of see his village, see his family, you meet the coaches who sort of like scattered him out, all that kind of stuff. But as part of those scenes, he's literally in the back of a pickup truck and he drives out into the jungle and he like hacks down some bananas. It's like, oh, like this is like such a big life change for him. Even just coming over to Canada / America and doing all this. The other part of this is just the basketball portion. And like I don't think it's particularly fair. I know like everyone gets really excited for rookies and we get ahead of ourselves, everyone makes like promising comps, but like I saw like one of the things was like, they found their next Bruno or like their next Giannis project and they're gonna develop like, and it's like, based on the way he runs and what it's like, look, I would like to be optimistic, and I'm not shutting the door on anything with this kid, but we also have to be realistic. We can't just say like anybody who runs well is going to become Giannis with this frame. Like there's like so much work that needs to go into this, like so much work. Like I'm thinking about like in terms of just the inexperience on the basketball front is huge. Like we're not even. I think like I don't know. I guess I haven't watched all like 450 players in the league, but like he would easily be top 5 most raw players. And of course, he's top 5 youngest players in the league too. So there's a portion of that, but it's just not the same. Like you see him out there today. He picked up, I think, 5 fouls in like how many minutes did he play? He played 7 minutes off the bench. He had 5 fouls and he had 2 turnovers. And when they give him the ball in the high post and he's trying to make the high low passes, he's like overcooking the passes and he's setting moving screens. And like he's I mean, honestly, it's not fair for him to play against Jonas because like JV's been in the league since like 2012. Um, but like JV's having his way with him, and even catching him with like cheap little foul calls and stuff like that. Like there needs to be so much time and patience and development put into this. and there's no guarantee of any results, that like I don't think it's productive or helpful to sort of like attach like just because he's a long shot, therefore the payout's going to be huge too. I think you could be a long shot and the payout could just be like you're a good player. But at the same time, like you have to acknowledge that right now there's just a lot of things that go into it. Like I've said it a couple times now, but when we were in summer league, luckily the summer league gyms are very small and they're very quiet. You know, I'm sitting courtside and I'm noticing that like every single play on offense and defense, Jama is just directing where Ulrich should be. Like how to set a screen, where to set the screen, when to set it, what kind of screen, if to clear out or not. And then his point guards are directing him. And of course, there's an element of this where it's like you always want your coach and I guess your coach to call up plays, but also like your point guard to direct the screener, all that kind of stuff. But it was a notable degree to the point where it was like, okay, like this is clearly a unique case. So we can accept and sit with all these facts. But like, yeah, I mean, like it's gonna take a lot of time. Like I think I don't know. Again, like it's also not fair at the same time to call him like a Bruno type player, which because obviously Bruno is kind of, especially here in Toronto, known as like, you know, it didn't work out. Bruno actually turned out to be kind of decent. It just took like literally 6 years for him to get there. And he's actually quite good every time I see him play for Brazil. So shouts to Bruno. But like, you know, like even just analogy wise, like it's gonna take a long time, man. It's actually gonna take a long time because there's just so much more to sort of catch up into. And I'm rooting for him. He seems like a really nice kid. I'm not sort of holding anything against him, you know. But I think realistically, the more you sort of watch like these preseason games, the more you end up watching like 905 games, which I'm sure he'll feature. You will see that there are going to be like missing gaps that you don't see with most NBA prospects. But hopefully, once those things are filled in, then you can start using the physical tools that he has. And like on that front, yeah, of course, he's 7 feet tall. He's quite bouncy. He's able to sort of run really fast and all that kind of stuff. Like that's all good. But the rest of like the active part of teaching him how to play basketball is going to be the make or break factor. It's not like Jamal Shead, who just basically needs to learn how to catch and shoot for three. But it's so clear that he knows how to play the rest of the game. Like there's like a world's difference between some of these rookies that the Raptors have on the roster right now. And that's what makes watching preseason for me, honestly, quite interesting. So thanks for your questions. I appreciate it. I appreciate everyone for watching late night as well. Let's hand out the 3 stars and the most important guy, and then let's get out of here. Your 3 stars from tonight's game. First star, I'll give it to Chris. Shouts to Chris, 22 points, 7 rebounds. Actually, Chris is actually a similar example to Chomche in a way. Now, Chris had more unique, differences in terms of like, he tore his ACL, and then he's also like, rather skinny, and so like there's like a different dimension in which he plays the game through. But Chris also came into the league like super athletic, super impactful when he's able to run around, but at the same time, he just wasn't in the right spots. And you can even tell with Chris, like this is after like Chris is like 31 now, right? Like even after all this time, there are still moments where you're like, okay, there's still a couple of missing fundamentals and gaps. Again, like, but it's not. I think, yeah, Chris actually would be like a huge developmental example for a guy like Chomche, in my opinion. But anyways, in any case, like, yeah, Chris had a really good game, 22.7 rebounds. Second star go to Scottie, 16 points, 8 rebounds, and assists, 2 steals. Had some really good moments. I would say Scottie was awesome for the first 2 minutes of the first quarter, and then awesome for the first 5 minutes of the third quarter. In between then, he looked slow. He looked not slow, but he just looked like a little tired, made some mistakes. But ultimately, he had a really impactful game. You tell me he had 7 really good minutes and he already did all that. It's a very promising sign. And then your third star, I probably will give it to. I'll probably give it a Jakob, 10 points, 2 rebounds, 3 assists, a steal. I mean, I think he just played really fundamental, really solid, really strong. But yeah, I mean, I also thought Mitchell played decently, and I think that Jamal played decently. Your Joe Henderson Award winner for who randomly lit up the Raptors, that's obviously got to go to Corey Kispert. I just thought, yeah, I mean, like he was awesome. He was awesome. 20 points on 7 of 11 shooting, 4 or 7 from 3. He took it to the rim a couple of times, played really strong, even had 2 blocks. I just thought he played really well. And yeah, I think Jack made the point that like, even if it's not him getting extended in Washington, he's certainly made himself into a pretty good player. And I think that a lot of teams could use Corey Kispert. So yeah, good for him. And, I thought, it's not the first time he's torched the Raptors either, by the way. And then your most important guy. So actually, even though I have started giving out this award already, and I think the first 2 winners are literally me and somebody, a fan who I'm sorry, I forget your name, but like they threw $5 into the stream, which is really cool. Thank you. I didn't know you can do that. Um, there was somebody after the last reaction podcast who suggested that we should just make this in the spirit of what the most important guy is in the NBA, which is sort of like who is the most important defensive player. And so kind of like a defensive player of the game type of thing. And I kind of like that. So in order to recognize that, I'm gonna go with Jamal Shead, who probably, if I had to retroactively hand this out, has already gone 2. He's like, he should be 2 for 2 with this, but I just love, like, even just, I think it just makes, he makes it fun to watch defense. You know, like he only got 1 steal today, but I swear he got 2. Twice where there's one where Jordan Poole's coming off the pick and roll. He definitely stole the ball right off of him. Another time where they try to throw a pick and roll, like a little pocket pass, he was able to deflect it away from going to JV and it went into the hands of another teammate. Then there was also 2 threes he erased from Corey Kispert just off like really aggressive closeouts. Like it's stuff like it makes watching defense fun. And I mean, like I'm a sicko and I like watching pretty much all basketball. Well, except for the first quarter of today's game. That was never even for me, but like I mean, like he makes defense exciting and he is like almost basically a walking most important guy. But I thought he did really well. So thanks everyone for watching. Thanks to producer Jerome for spending a Friday night doing this, and enjoy watching 2 more cut downs on this after we are done the pod. But of course, yeah, you can find us live on YouTube after most games. The best way to know if we're going to go live is we will send you a notification. So if you subscribe to the Hello and Welcome Podcast YouTube feed, you can hit subscribe, you can hit the alert button, and it will just tell you when we're going. To also tell you, obviously, when our episodes are dropping throughout the week. We got a lot of exciting things planned. And of course, if you're listening, through the more traditional podcast routes, through Apple Podcasts or through Spotify, continue to leave reviews, leave ratings. I've been seeing some really flow in on the Apple side, and I think that's been awesome to see. Once again, the importance of this, it's not just a pure vanity thing, but it really, especially with us like launching independent this year, this is the best way for us to sort of climb higher in the charts. And so to find and capture more of our old audience, but also to find new Raptor fans as the season starts. And it's pretty easy. You literally just go to the podcast page where the feed is, and you go down. There's a star thing. You hit 5 stars. You can write a review, put in a little nickname, write like 10 words, and it literally takes less than 30 seconds, but it actually makes a huge difference on our end. So thanks everyone for listening. And yeah, we'll be back after Sunday's game when the Raptors play the Boston Celtics. So this has been the Hello and Welcome Podcast presented by Betway, and have a good weekend.